Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inside IUE Sports. I'm Isaiah Hoffman, your voice of the Red Wolves, and I have a very special guest with me today. I have head coach of the cross-country team, head coach Cam Teberg. How are you doing today, Coach?
No, I'm doing well. Again, greatly appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, no problem. And we're just going to dive right into it. First off, congrats on the boys cross-country conference title. As a head coach, what does that mean to you for this team, and as a head coach being the first men's cross-country title for the conference? How does that mean, and what does it mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, it was an exciting time for the program. Again, any time that something for the first time happens, whether it is, first time winning a meet or first time, obviously, winning the whole conference. It is an exciting time. Obviously, the most exciting part of it is, what the athletes accomplished. They were the ones that did it, and again, it was definitely a statement for the program, and something that we continue to look forward to and continue to hopefully build on moving forward. But when it comes to, we always talk about, rewriting the history here at IU East. It's going to be tough to say that last year doesn't include its own chapter, or at least multiple chapters, and kind of that history book of what this program was all about.
Yeah, and Caden even mentioned it in the interview that you guys will see later on in the episode. He talked about how this year's probably going to be tougher than last year with Shawnee State joining the conference. How much competition do they really bring? As a coach, you're looking at every team, you're studying every team. So maybe for the audience at home, how tough is Shawnee State going to be now that they're in the conference?
Yeah, I mean, they have an exceptional program when it comes to tradition. They've been competitive in the NAIA level for a very long time. They have some very highly talented runners that are going to be really competitive. Last year, we beat them head-to-head at a meet earlier in the season at the NAIA Great Lakes meet when we were competitive against them, head-to-head. But then at Nationals, of course, while we were winning our conference, they were busy winning their old conference. And they beat us head-to-head there at Nationals. And so right now, based off of last year's results, we're 1-1 with them. And so, it's going to be again, I think the team knows, obviously they are one of the new additions to the conference, and they're going to be a really competitive team, obviously with the amount of talent and the amount of tradition they have. But then we also don't want to overlook some of the other programs that continue to get better. Just because we won it last year does not mean we're necessarily in the driver's seat. It means that we got to stay hungry, because I know those other programs that are also going to be trying to compete at a higher level too. And so, but it's going to be a fun conference. That's for sure on the men's side, and then on the women's side, again, it's going to be a pretty competitive league. Again, I think the women's side is quite a bit more open than I'd say it was in the past, and so realistically, you're looking at about 6 or 7 teams that, if things go right, can probably be pretty competitive towards the end of the season.
And Coach McConaughey was talking about that, the win after IUK, everyone was high in spirits, and then the next day, they didn't come out the gate like they were supposed to. So as the head coach, what was, how do you, take, as great as last year was with the conference title, how do you tell the team, okay, it's time, it's a new year, we won last year, but now it's a whole new year. How do you switch that to where there's not that, as Brooke Lepper said when I talked to her earlier, this false hope of success, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always the competitor in us. Again, as much as winning the conference, and again, as I mentioned, is going to be a chapter in this history book of our program. Again, what happened at Nationals? If that doesn't get you hungry, I don't know what does. Out of the 36 teams at Nationals, we got 30th, so we only beat 6 teams down there. Now, while we were easily the youngest team down there, it's still that's going to draw some hunger. Again, and the hunger to just get back, but then also the hunger to do something at the highest level in the NAIA. And that's where I think it goes. While yes, we can dwell on, we can look at some of the great successes we've had, and again, rightly deserved. There's also the other notion where, well, when we got with the big dogs, what happened? Well, we were pretty competitive, but we want to be a little bit more competitive. And so I think that's what drives a lot of the hunger from that end. And then on the women's side, again, we were, fairly competitive in the middle of the pack of the conference last year, and we're looking to, be one of those teams where when we write scouting reports at the end of the season, we actually show up on team scouting reports. We actually are a team that has a shot when we get down there. And I think, last year, realistically, we knew we probably weren't one of those top teams in the conference level. This year we'd like to be one of those teams that is at least in the realm of conversation when it comes to being competitive down at the conference level.
So obviously, when you're going through the season, Coach, you're obviously doing recruiting, very busy with recruiting. And you said you got a lot of recruits coming in this year.
Yeah.
So can you tell me, just give us kind of a base of what all these recruits for both men's and women can bring to the table?
Yeah, I mean, on the men's side, again, we're bringing back vast majority of our roster. We essentially are bringing back 6 of our top 7 runners. And so we have 5 new faces coming in. What they're really going to bring to us is, obviously the next group, the next group of competitors that kind of take what the last year's freshman class did and kind of move with that. But then also, they're going to have big roles when it comes to the track side of things. Cross, again, we could see maybe 1 or 2 of them get in the top 10, and that means on the travel squad for nationals and that type of stuff if we're fortunate enough to get there. But especially with the freshman group, they're going to be big contributors from the distance track side of things. Each of them have roles, and some of them are more mid-distance and some things like that. And then on the women's side, we have a pretty big group coming in. We have 6 traditional freshmen coming in, and then we had 3 transfers come in as well. And so we are looking to be pretty competitive. We're taking what we had last year, graduating Savannah Hart, which obviously was one of the top runners. And when we look at that history book of this program, it's tough to not look at the history book and not mention Savannah Hart at some point in it. And obviously her graduating, but I think we have a lot more depth this year on the women's side. We have a lot larger roster, which of course means more competitive practices and just having more depth and being able to have more general competition in practice, but also still build the bonds that we really want, I think is going to be pretty helpful on the women's side. And so while the girls, we're going to have some of these freshmen and some of these new runners come in are going to be varsity girls, will be varsity girls coming in. Again, everybody's going to have a role, though. We always say that is everybody has a role, whether they're varsity or whether they're going to be varsity in track for the distance side of things. They all are part of the bigger distance program that we talk about here.
And I heard Julia say that, she has seen this program come such a long way from when she was a freshman, and you have built this program up. So for you to be at this point, to get that conference title last year now, of all these recruits coming in, how do you feel just to know you've really built this program with so many years of hard work and dedication? How do you feel about just the growth of this program?
Yeah, I mean, I always kind of look at it the history book side of things. We're trying to write chapters here. We're trying to write a legacy. We're trying to write chapters that people are going to remember. And I think we've definitely done some of those things. We definitely have written a couple chapters in the history book of IU East Distance. But then there's the other part is we're not done. Again, you can say, conference title's great and that stuff's great. It's not the end goal though. The end goal is we got some bigger mountains to climb. We got some more chapters to write. And while appreciative of what's happened, and it's great to look back and and when I go look at that history book and I see a lot of it is the last couple years, that's an exciting spot. But I think the biggest thing is and what kind of keeps me hungry is the book isn't written yet. There's a whole lot more chapters.
There's more to go.
There's a lot more writing that needs to be done. And so that's kind of how I would kind of look at it is, thankful for the opportunity to work with some great athletes that have kind of done some great things here. But also, again, the idea that, the program isn't done. We have continued success and we want to continue to build off of it.
Keep setting the bar higher. You love to see it and hear it. Coach, let's look at this summer. For you last season, what were some things that you wanted to come into the summer and work on with this team, whether what that was personal with some runners or maybe just the team as a whole? Yeah,
I think a lot of it, especially with the returners, is we always say, here in this program, there's a level of individualization built in with each of our training programs. I mean, again, we talked about some athletes, later today you'll talk with Caden, who has a pretty unique training program. And I think for us, what this summer was being able to visualize what that training program was going to look like for some athletes and then better maximize it. And I think we're going to see that on the women's side as well as, we've seen some runners who've been in the program for a while, and I think we were able to more maximize what we were trying to do with them training-wise. Because again, college training and honestly college running in general it's about how hard you can push without getting them hurt. Again, that's without going into too much detail because injuries derail everything. in our sport. And so there's only so much you can push without having the injuries be a backflux. And I think this year, a big thing over the summer was we were able to push, but yet I think we came into camp pretty healthy, which is a little different comparatively to last year, and that's because of just the knowledge of the athletes. But especially on the men's side, we really proved on mileage side of things. We were going from 65 miles a week to where at least the top end guys are north of 80 plus now, and so we got them to a good foundation spot. We actually just did a time trial. I'm not going to say a time trial, I should say a tempo workout, and the tempo workout would have put us in the top 10 in school history on time-wise, based off of what those 4 did accomplish. Like if you just take the top 10 numbers of the fastest 5K, 8K times in school history, there literally 4 of them would have been on there. And so, we definitely improved in that regard. But really, those were the big points of emphasis, was maximize each of our athletes, personalized training programs, and then especially on some of the high-end guys, get them to that next threshold of mileage that can a lot of times be what makes them to the next step. And I think we've kind of done some of that stuff here, and we're in a pretty good spot for some of the athletes here.
And when we talk about that next step, this season could very much well be a huge one for you guys. So what are you most confident about heading into the season, whether that's with the women's team or the men's side of things? As a coach, you just talked about, what you guys have been working with all summer. What are you most confident about heading into this season?
I mean, I think there's a genuine sense of togetherness here on this team. And again, it comes with building it over the summer. Mm-hmm. Obviously, with the men's side, again, the guys have been around each other aside from the 5 new freshmen coming in. But a lot of the freshmen come from schools where they already are from, other athletes on the team are from those schools. Mm-hmm. And so a sense of togetherness is something I'm pretty confident about. We have a really good idea for that, and that's something I think is important. Again, as I always mention, is that the training's great, but if you don't got the support of your team behind you, you're probably not going to peak out, maximize level-wise. I think that's an important variable. And so I think that's something I'm pretty confident in. I'm also pretty confident in our ability to compete, especially on the men's side. I'll talk more on the men's side, and then I'll talk about the women's. But the men's side, I think we're in a level where we're really ready to compete. And that's a huge, huge variable. It's one thing to run well in practice and workouts that don't matter. It's another thing to race well, and I think we're at a good level to the point where we're going to have some pretty strong performances early on in the season through across the board. And so that's something I'm pretty confident about. On the women's side, again, I think some things that we have done well is I think we've had a lot of girls pretty buy into what we're trying to do training-wise. Some of them have never trained twice a day for certain things, and we have quite a few girls that are on some variation of that, whether it's a cross-training session and a running session in the afternoon, or 2 running sessions, or whatever the case would be. I think we're seeing a pretty good buy-in on that, and that should in turn lead to some better results toward the end of the season. And so that's would be some of the big things that I'm pretty confident about, is we've seen buy-in, we've seen a sense of togetherness, and then we've seen I think a little bit more eagerness to compete, which again, it's one thing to be a hobby runner, and everybody can be a hobby runner and just go run when they want to run. It's another thing to be a college runner, and college runners need to compete, and that's, I think, is one of the big variations between the hobby running world and the, all right, let's go try to run a fast time.
It definitely is a grind. I have some friends that also went to college for cross-country track, and I know how tough it can be on you guys. So let's look at this season and the schedule.
Yeah.
What meets are you, maybe you have highlighted or circled, like, I really want to go out there and show out, perform? What are some meets you're looking forward to?
Yeah, I mean, even just right off the bat, I mean, next, not this week, but the following week, so early September, we are at a meet where it's primarily a Division I meet. It's going to be Wright State, Dayton, Ohio State. Mm-hmm. And then some D2s and some NAIs. That's a pretty competitive meet for this point of the season. This is the first year where we've started with such a competitive meet where we literally have a Power 5 school at the meet. You don't see that very often. And so, you don't see our basketball team going to play Ohio State. And so, so I think that's where, we're going to see pretty quickly of where we are, at least starting the season. Another big meet that I think really started to get things to click last year was at Terre Haute in late September. That is an under the lights meet. That's a kind of a cool experience. That meet has also picked up a lot more traction when it comes to the amount of teams at it, which it should be about double the size compared to last year, which will make it a more competitive meet. I mean, on the guy side, we won pretty handily as a team. But again, it's just a meet where I think a lot of things start to click because it's at that point of the season where we start to kind of turn the page on the microcycle. And then I think the other huge one before conference, of course, and possibly the national meet is the NAI Great Lakes meet. Again, it's a meet where the Raiders are there. It's a meet where where if you have any aspirations on nationals and those type of things, you need to run well there because that's the meet where, again, the people who are going to be rating and the people who are going to decide at large bids, oh, guess what? They're there.
All there.
They're there. And so it's a meet where that is a very important meet, aside from, of course, the conference and national level meets. And so we really have kind of 3 big meets circled that are going to be, each of them are going to have their own implication, and each of them are going to have their own story to tell. But it's a pretty big important part of those 3 big meets I think we'd have circled.
All right, Coach, I am excited to see how this season goes. Once again, thank you for joining me here today on Inside IUE Sports. But folks, do not go anywhere. We have cross-country runners coming up next that we will be talking to right here on Inside IUE Sports.